Okay, we're going to start taking two polynomials and dividing them by each other. But before we do that, we need to revisit what long division is because it's probably been a little while since you've done long division. So what we're going to start off doing is using long division to divide 3013 by 3, just to remind us of how to use long division. So really there's a cycle that we pretty much go through when we're doing long division. You start off by dividing, and then when you're done dividing, you're going to multiply, and you'll end up subtracting. And it's kind of just this cycle that you keep repeating when you're doing long division over and over and over. So the first thing we'll do is divide. What we're going to divide is 3 by 13. How many times does 3 go into 3? How many times does 3 go into 3? And the answer is 1 time. So we'll record our 1, and then we're moving on to our multiply step, where we're going to multiply that 1 by this 3. And we'll record that product beneath the 3 under the division bar. And now we'll subtract. So we'll do 3 minus 3, which is 0. And those should always, pretty much always, they should cancel when we're doing polynomial division. But in this case, we're going to have 0. All right? And then we're going to bring down our next term. So now we're going to ask ourselves again, how many times does 3 go into 0? Or in other words, what is 0 divided by 3? And the answer to that is it's 0. So now we multiply 0 by 3, and we get 0. And we subtract 0 minus 0 and get 0. And we're going to bring down our 1. 1 divided by 3. Again, 3 doesn't go into 1, so we're going to put 0. 3 times 0 is again 0, and we subtract, and this time 1 minus 0 is 1. And for the last time, we're going to bring down our final term. How many times does 3 go into 13? Goes into it 4 times, but not perfectly, because 4 times 3 is 12, which leaves us, when we subtract, with a remainder of 1. So in 3rd grade, or whenever you first learned long division, you may have just written R1 or something like that. Or maybe you learned to put a decimal place here and bring the zeros down and keep doing this. All right, it's possible that you've done that before. What we're going to do, though, is when we're doing long division with polynomials, it's a little bit simpler than any of that. What you want to do is think about this 1 as being a 1/3, because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to divide this by 3. And we're done with all the terms that we had here. So this is a remainder, but the way that we want to view it is we want to view it as 1004 plus we have a 1/3 left over. 1, because that was our remainder, divided by 3, because that's what we've been dividing everything by. So we're going to apply that same exact process to dividing 6x cubed minus 19x squared plus 16x minus 4 by x minus 2. So again, same thing. 6x cubed minus 19x squared. This goes under the division bar. And we're dividing by x minus 2. And the first thing we want to do is we want to figure out how many times does x go into 6x cubed? So in other words, what is 6x cubed divided by x? And the answer to that is 6x squared. So we'll go back to our cycle. It's the same thing. Now we multiply. But we have to multiply the 6x squared by everything over here. So we're like distributing it into each of those two terms. So 6x squared times x is 6x cubed. And 6x squared times negative 2 is negative 12x squared. And we are subtracting. Okay, so 6x squared, or cubed, minus 6x cubed is 0. Those should cancel. Like we just talked about with numbers, when we're doing this with division, these will always cancel unless you've made a mistake, so that has to happen. But we do have to do negative 19x squared minus negative 12, which we may want to do keep change for just to make this a little bit easier to visualize. So negative 7x squared. And then we're going to bring down our next term. And we're going to repeat the process. How many times does x go into negative 7x squared? Goes into negative 7x squared, negative 7x times. And how I know that is off to the side, I could do negative 7x squared divided by x. That goes away and that cancels, and we're left with negative 7x, right? So that's how I'm doing that, to figure out how many times one thing goes into another thing. I'm just dividing. That's a division step. And now I multiply my negative 7x by x minus 2. So I should have negative 7x squared plus 14x, and now we subtract. These will cancel if we've done our job correctly, and 16 minus 14 is 2x. Bring down the next term. Last one, how does x go into 2x, or how many times does x go into 2x? Goes into it 2 times, because 2x divided by x is 2. That's why. And now I multiply 2 by x minus 2. So that gives me 2x minus 4. Those cancel. And negative 4 minus negative 4 is also 0. So we don't have a remainder in this case. All right? We may have remainders in the future, but in this case, we don't have one. So when we divide these two polynomials, our quotient ends up being 6x cubed minus 7x. Sorry, not 6x cubed. 6x squared minus 7x plus 2. I'm going to do one more here, but I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. And then we'll practice this in class. All right, let's set it up. All right. Just like when we were multiplying and dividing with a binomial linear number here, this is a quadratic, but we can still do this. It's the same thing. We're just going to first see how many times does x squared go into 2x to the 4th. So 2x to the 4th divided by x squared would be 2x squared. And again, I'm going to take that 2x squared and multiply it by each of these terms. So I'll end up with 2x to the 4th plus 4x to the 3rd minus 6x squared. And I'll need to subtract here. So my x to the 4th terms are going to cancel. Looks like my x to the 3rd terms are going to cancel as well. And I'm going to end up with a positive x squared. So I'll bring down the next term. How many times does x squared go into x squared? 1 time. And I'm going to put the 1 there because you're noticing that we skipped an x to the 1st term. The reason that happened is because we canceled both of these instead of just canceling the first two. So really, there was a whole process that took place where we brought down a 0. How many times does x squared go into 0? 0 times, and we cycled up through the 0. But we don't need to do all that, right? If they both cancel, go right on to the next set of terms. And just remember that there was a missing term here. There is an invisible 0x right there, because that's that middle term in our quadratic. All right, so then we're multiplying our 1 by x squared plus 2x minus 3. So x squared plus 2x minus 3. All right, we want to bring that 2 down so we can do this subtraction here. And our first two terms cancel, which they should. 3x minus 2x is 1x, and negative 2 minus negative 3 is 1. So we end up with an x plus 1, and you're going to notice now that x squared doesn't go into x. We can't do that division, so we're done dividing. But we also want to recognize that this is left over, so this is technically our remainder. So if you look at how we handled our remainder when we divided by numbers up here, we ended up leaving our remainder as the remainder over this thing that we divided by, the divisor. All right? So we want to do the same exact thing here. Our final answer is going to be 2x squared plus 1, because I don't need to write the 0x, plus, this is our remainder, over the divisor. And that is the final answer. So that's how we handle remainders, all right? When we get to class tomorrow, we'll practice doing more of these independently. But I wanted to make sure we do this in a video so that we have as much time in class to practice just doing this.